The Watchman's Hollow Chapter 1. The Hollow's Edge. In the spring of 1963, I took a job in Stillwater, a town tucked into the folds of eastern Kentucky, where the Appalachian Hills rose like the spine of some ancient beast. I was 26, adrift after a stint in the Army, and the idea of solitude suited me better than the crowded bars of Louisville. The job was simple: watchman for the Stillwater Timber Company, stationed at a lookout post on the northern rim of a valley they called the Hollow. The company owned thousands of acres, a tangled expanse of pine and oak too dense for roads, too wild for settlement. They needed someone to keep an eye out for fires, poachers, or anything else that might threaten their profits. I didn't ask many questions. The pay was enough to keep me fed, and the isolation was what I wanted. The post was a squat cabin, perched on a rocky outcrop overlooking the hollow. It had a single room with a cot, a wood stove, and a desk cluttered with maps and a radio that hissed more than it spoke. A narrow porch wrapped around the front, where I'd sit in the evenings, watching the sun sink into the treeline. The air carried the sharp scent of sap and damp earth, and the only sounds were the wind rustling through the pines and the occasional cry of a hawk. I'd been told the hollow was untouched, a place where even loggers hesitated to venture. The company's maps marked it as a conservation zone, but the locals in Stillwater called it cursed. I didn't put much stock in their stories. I'd seen enough of the world to know fear often came from ignorance. My first week was quiet. I walked the patrol lines, checked the trails for signs of trespassers, and logged the weather in a notebook the company provided. The hollow stretched below me, a sea of green broken only by the glint of a creek winding through its center. At night, the stars burned bright, and the darkness felt heavier than any I'd known. I liked it. The solitude let me think, or not think, without the weight of other people's expectations. But by the second week, I started to notice things. Small things. A branch snapped too loudly in the distance. A patch of earth near the trail looked churned, as if something heavy had dragged itself through. I told myself it was deer, maybe a bear. The hollow was wild, after all. Chapter 2. The other watchman. The company had another watchman, a man named Amos Carver, stationed at a post on the southern edge of the hollow, maybe 10 miles from my cabin. I'd met him once, when I signed on in Stillwater. He was older, maybe 50, with a face carved from years of sun and wind. His eyes were pale blue, sharp like a blade, and he spoke in short, clipped sentences. He'd been with the company for decades, longer than anyone could remember. The foreman in town said Amos knew the hollow better than anyone, but he didn't share much. Keeps to himself, the foreman had said, spitting tobacco into the dirt. You'll get used to it. Amos and I were supposed to check in by radio every evening, but he rarely answered. When he did, his voice crackled through the static, low and deliberate, reporting nothing out of the ordinary. I didn't mind. I wasn't here to make friends. But one morning, while walking the Eastern Trail, I found a set of boot prints crossing my path. They were fresh, the edges crisp in the mud, and they led toward the hollow's center before vanishing into a thicket of briars. The prints were too large for mine, and no loggers were scheduled to work that week. I followed them for a while, but the briars grew too dense, tearing at my coat. I marked the spot on my map and headed back, the back of my neck prickling. That evening, I called Amos on the radio. "You been up my way?" I asked. The static hissed for a long moment before he answered. "No," he said. "Stay on your side, Ellis." His tone wasn't hostile, just flat, like he was stating a fact. I didn't push it. But the next day, I found more prints, this time closer to my cabin. They circled the clearing where I stacked firewood, then trailed off into the trees. I stood there, staring at the tracks, my hand resting on the knife at my belt. The air felt too still, like the forest was holding its breath. Chapter 3. The town's whispers. I went into Stillwater every 2 weeks for supplies. The town was small, a cluster of clapboard houses and a general store strung along a single road. The people were polite but distant, their eyes lingering on me a moment too long. I'd sit at the store's counter, nursing a coffee, and listen to the locals talk. They spoke of the hollow in hushed tones, trading stories of lost hunters, strange lights in the trees, and shapes that moved too fast to be human. I dismissed most of it as superstition, but one story stuck with me. An old man, his hands knotted with arthritis, leaned close and said, "The hollow's got a keeper. Always has. You see it, you don't come back the same." I asked what he meant, but he just shook his head and shuffled off. The store clerk, a woman named Ruth, overheard and gave me a tight smile. "Don't mind him," she said. "Folks here like their ghost stories." But her voice wavered, and she busied herself with the register. I didn't press her. On the drive back to the cabin, the old man's words gnawed at me. The keeper. I thought of Amos, alone at his post, and the boot prints that didn't belong. That night, I dreamed of the hollow, its trees bending inward like fingers, and a figure standing just beyond the light of my lantern. The dreams came more often after that. They weren't clear, just fragments of shadow and sound. A low growl, the crunch of leaves, a glimpse of something pale slipping between the pines. I woke each time with my heart pounding, the cabin's walls feeling too thin. I started keeping my rifle by the cot, though I told myself it was for bears. The hollow was changing me, or maybe it was showing me what was already there. Chapter 4. The first sign. It was late April when I saw it. I was on the Western Trail, checking a firebreak the company had cleared the previous year. The sky was heavy with clouds, the air thick with the promise of rain. I'd stopped to drink from my canteen when I noticed the silence. No birds, no wind, just a stillness that pressed against my ears. I scanned the trees, my hand tightening on the rifle slung over my shoulder. Then I saw it, maybe 100 yards down the slope, a shape moving through the underbrush. It was too tall for a deer, too thin for a bear. It moved haltingly, like it was dragging something, its limbs jerking in a way that made my stomach twist. That I crouched behind a fallen log, my breath shallow. The shape paused, its head turning slowly, as if it sensed me. I couldn't make out its face, just a pale blur against the green. Then it was gone, slipping into the trees without a sound. I waited, counting my breaths, until the birds started singing again. When I stood, my legs felt unsteady. I followed the path it had taken, my boots sinking into the soft earth. There were no tracks, no broken branches, nothing to prove it had been there. But near the spot where it vanished, I found a patch of ground scorched black, the grass curled into ash. The air smelled of sulfur, sharp and bitter. I didn't tell Amos. I didn't trust the radio, and I wasn't sure he'd believe me anyway. But I started carrying my rifle everywhere, even on short patrols. The hollow didn't feel wild anymore. It felt alive. Chapter 5. The meeting. A week later, Amos showed up at my cabin. It was dusk, the sky bruised purple, and I was splitting wood when I heard the crunch of gravel. He stood at the edge of the clearing, his coat dusted with pine needles, a shotgun resting in the crook of his arm. His face was unreadable, but his eyes flicked to the rifle leaning against the porch. "We need to talk," he said. That I invited him in, though the cabin felt smaller with him there. He sat at the desk, his hands folded, and studied me like he was measuring something. "You seen anything?" he asked. I hesitated, then told him about the shape in the trees, the scorched ground. He listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening. When I finished, he leaned back and sighed. "Thought you might," he said. "It's been quiet too long." He told me the hollow wasn't just a forest. It was old, older than the hills, and it had rules. Things lived there, things that didn't follow the laws of flesh and bone. He called them strays, remnants of something that had been in the hollow before men came with their axes and maps. Most stayed deep, out of sight, but sometimes they wandered close. He didn't say how he knew, but his voice carried a weight that made me believe him. "You see one again," he said. "Don't follow it. And don't look at its face." He left before I could ask more, his boots fading into the dark. I stood on the porch, the night pressing close, and wondered what I'd gotten myself into. The hollow wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to something else. Chapter 6. The storm. The rains came in May, heavy and relentless, turning the trails to mud and the creek into a torrent. I stayed in the cabin most days, the radio silent, the windows rattling with each gust. The hollow was a blur of gray, its edges softened by the downpour. I tried to read, to write letters I'd never send, but my thoughts kept drifting to Amos's words. Strays. I saw them in every shadow, every flicker of lightning. One night, the storm worsened. Thunder shook the cabin, and the wind howled like a living thing. I was stoking the stove when the radio crackled. Ellis, Amos's voice cut through the static. Stay inside. Lock the door. Before I could respond, the line went dead. I checked the lock, then grabbed my rifle and sat by the window, peering into the dark. The rain lashed the glass, but through the blur, I saw something move. A shape, tall and thin, stood at the edge of the clearing. It didn't sway with the wind, didn't flinch as lightning tore the sky. It just stood, its head tilted toward the cabin. I gripped the rifle, my pulse hammering. The shape took a step forward, then another, its movements jerky, like a puppet on strings. Lightning flashed, and for a moment, I saw its face, or what passed for one. Pale, featureless, with hollows where eyes should have been. Then the light faded, and it was gone. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the door, the rifle across my knees, listening to the storm rage. Chapter 7. The hunt. The rain stopped at dawn, leaving the hollow steaming and raw. I found tracks outside the cabin, deep and uneven, circling the porch. They weren't human, not exactly. Too long, too narrow, with claw marks at the toes. I followed them down the trail, my rifle loaded, my boots slipping in the mud. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and something sharper, like rotting meat. The tracks led to the creek, where they vanished into the water. I stood on the bank, scanning the trees, and felt eyes on me. Not Amos. Not human. I went to his post that afternoon, a 3-hour trek through the sodden forest. His cabin was larger than mine, its walls weathered to a dull gray. The door was open, and inside, the air was heavy with the scent of oil and smoke. Amos was at a table, cleaning a rifle, his hands steady despite the shadows under his eyes. The walls were lined with shelves, crowded with books, jars, and objects I couldn't name, bones, feathers, a mirror with symbols etched into its frame. He didn't look surprised to see me. I told him about the shape, the tracks. He nodded, like he'd expected it. It's hunting, he said. Me doesn't matter. It's awake now. He showed me a book, its pages brittle and stained, with drawings of things that shouldn't exist, limbs twisted, faces half-formed. He said the strays were bound to the hollow, tied to something deeper, something he called the heart. He wouldn't say more, but he gave me a knife, its blade inscribed with symbols like those on the mirror. Keep it close, he said, and don't run. Running makes it stronger. Chapter 8. The heart of the hollow. I stopped sleeping after that. The hollow was too loud, too alive. Every creak of the cabin, every rustle in the trees set my nerves on edge. I patrolled with the rifle and the knife, my eyes scanning for shapes that didn't belong. The air grew heavier, the light dimmer, like the forest was closing in. I found more signs, scorched patches, claw marks on trees, a deer carcass torn open, its bones licked clean. The hollow was changing, or maybe I was seeing it for what it was. One evening, I saw the shape again, closer this time, standing on the ridge above my cabin. It was taller than before, its limbs stretched thin, its head swaying like it was sniffing the air. I raised the rifle, but my hands shook. Amos's words echoed, "Don't run." I backed toward the cabin, keeping the shape in sight. It didn't move, just watched, its hollow face catching the last light. I locked the door and sat in the dark, the knife in my hand, waiting for it to come. It didn't, but I knew it was out there, patient, waiting for me to slip. I decided to find the heart. Amos hadn't explained it, but I felt it, a pull deep in the hollow, like a weight on my chest. I packed a bag, food, water, the rifle, the knife, and set out at dawn. The forest was quiet, the trails overgrown, but I followed the creek, its banks littered with stones that gleamed like eyes. The air grew colder as I descended, the trees taller, their branches knitting together to block the sun. By dusk, I reached a clearing, its center dominated by a gnarled oak, its roots twisting into the earth like veins. The ground around it was scorched, the air thick with sulfur. This was it, the heart. Chapter 9. The Keeper. The shape was waiting. It stood beneath the oak, its form shifting, now human, now beast, now something else. Its face was a void, but I felt its gaze, heavy and hungry. I raised the rifle, but the knife in my other hand grew warm, its symbols glowing faintly. The shape lunged, faster than I'd thought possible, its claws raking the air. I fired, the shot echoing through the clearing, but it didn't flinch. It slammed into me, its weight crushing, its breath cold and sour. I drove the knife into its side, and it screamed, a sound that tore through my skull. The shape staggered back, its form unraveling, threads of shadow spilling into the air. But it didn't fall. It reached for me, its claws grazing my arm, and I felt a coldness spread like ice in my veins. I swung the knife again, aiming for its chest, and it shrieked, collapsing into the scorched earth. The ground shook, the oak's roots trembling, and the air grew still. I stumbled back, my arm burning, my breath ragged. The shape was gone, but the hollow felt heavier, like it was mourning. I heard footsteps. Amos emerged from the trees, his shotgun raised, his face grim. "You found it," he said. He knelt by the oak, his hand brushing the scorched ground. "But it's not over." He told me the truth then. The strays were part of the hollow, bound to the heart, and the heart was alive. Killing a stray weakened it, but it would call another, stronger, unless the heart was destroyed. He'd tried once, years ago, and failed. The knife, the mirror, the symbols, they were tools, passed down by others who'd watched the hollow. He was its keeper, and now, so was I. Chapter 10. The choice. We burned the oak that night, its flames licking the sky, the air thick with ash and sulfur. The ground screamed, a sound I felt in my bones, but the heart was silent by dawn. Amos didn't speak as we worked, his eyes fixed on the fire. When it was done, he gave me the mirror and the book. "You'll need them," he said. "It'll come back. Always does." He walked into the trees, his silhouette fading, and I knew I wouldn't see him again. I stayed in the hollow. The company didn't ask questions when I reported Amos's absence. They sent a new watchman, a young man who didn't stay long. The hollow was quiet for a while, but I saw signs, scorched patches, claw marks, shapes in the distance. I carried the knife, the mirror, the book, and I walked the trails, watching, waiting. The hollow was mine now, or maybe I was its. I didn't run. I couldn't. The heart was gone, but something else was waking, deep in the earth, and I was the only one left to face it. Conclusion. The keeper's burden. The quiet days. The fire that consumed the oak left a scar in the hollow, a blackened circle of earth that refused to heal. For weeks after Amos vanished into the trees, I walked the trails alone, the mirror tucked into my coat, the knife heavy at my belt, the book hidden under my cot. The hollow was silent, or so it seemed. The birds returned, their calls sharp against the morning mist, and the creek ran clear again, its banks no longer littered with stones that gleamed like eyes. But the silence was not empty. It was the kind that pressed against my skull, a weight that grew heavier each day I spent in the cabin. I was the keeper now, though I didn't fully understand what that meant. Amos's words echoed in my mind. "It'll come back." Always does. I stayed because I had nowhere else to go. The army had left me restless, the city too loud, too crowded. Stillwater was a speck on the map, its people wary of the hollow and wary of me. The company sent a new watchman, a boy named Tommy who barely spoke and left after a month, his eyes wide with something he wouldn't name. I didn't blame him. The hollow had a way of peeling back your skin, showing you the raw edges of yourself. I wrote reports for the company, logged the weather, checked the fire breaks, but my real work was different. I watched for signs, scorched patches, claw marks, shapes in the dusk. They were there, faint at first, like whispers in the wind. The cabin became my world. Its walls were thin, the wood warped from years of rain and cold, but it was mine. I spent evenings on the porch, the lantern casting a weak glow across the clearing. The stars were brighter here, sharper, but they felt distant, like they belonged to another sky. The book Amos left me was a puzzle I couldn't solve. Its pages were filled with symbols I didn't understand, drawings of things that made my stomach turn, limbs too long, faces too wrong. I read it by lamplight, my fingers tracing the faded ink, but it gave no answers. The mirror was worse. Its surface was dark, not quite glass, and when I looked into it, my reflection seemed delayed, as if it belonged to someone else. I kept it wrapped in cloth, hidden in a drawer, but I felt it watching me. The dreams came back. Not every night, but often enough to leave me hollow-eyed. I saw the oak burning, its roots writhing like snakes, and a shape moving through the flames, its face a void. Sometimes it was Amos, his pale eyes fixed on me, his mouth moving without sound. Other times it was the stray, its claws scraping the earth, its breath cold against my neck. I woke with the knife in my hand, the blade warm, as if it had been waiting for me. The hollow was alive, and I was part of it now, bound to its rhythms, its secrets. The first return it was late summer when the signs grew stronger. The air turned heavy, thick with the scent of pine and something sharper, like metal left to rust. I found a deer carcass near the eastern trail, its ribs cracked open, its heart missing. The ground around it was scorched, the grass curled into ash. I knelt, my fingers hovering over the blackened earth, and felt a pulse, faint but real, like a heartbeat buried deep. The hollow was waking again, and I knew it wasn't finished with me. I walked deeper into the forest than I ever had before, following the creek past the point where the trails ended. The trees grew taller here, their branches knitting together to block the sun. The air was cold, too cold for August, and the ground was soft, sinking beneath my boots. I carried the rifle, the knife, the mirror, though I wasn't sure why. The book had mentioned a heart, not the oak, but something older, something that couldn't be burned. I didn't know what I was looking for, only that I had to find it before it found me. The clearing was different this time. It wasn't the oak, which was gone, its stump a blackened ruin. This was a new place, deeper in the hollow, where the trees parted to reveal a circle of stones, each one taller than a man, their surfaces etched with symbols like those in Amos's book. The air here was still, the silence so thick it felt like a weight on my chest. I stepped into the circle, my boots crunching on the dry earth, and saw it. A pit in the center, its edges jagged, as if something had clawed its way out. The air smelled of sulfur, and the ground was warm, too warm. I stood there, the mirror in one hand, the knife in the other, and felt the hollow watching. The pit seemed to breathe, its edges pulsing faintly, like the rise and fall of a chest. I took a step closer, then stopped. Something moved in the trees, a shadow that didn't belong. It was tall, thinner than the stray I'd fought, its limbs bending at angles that made my eyes ache. It didn't approach, just watched, its head tilted like it was studying me. I raised the mirror, my hands shaking, and its reflection flickered, not solid but fragmented, like a broken window. The shape froze, its limbs twitching, then slipped back into the trees that I didn't follow. Amos's warning rang in my ears. Don't look at its face. I backed away, the pit's pulse fading behind me, and made my way to the cabin. That night, I barred the door and sat with the rifle across my knees, the mirror on the table, its surface catching the lantern's light. The hollow was testing me, or maybe it was claiming me. I wasn't sure which. The keeper's task the days blurred into weeks, then months. The hollow didn't sleep, and neither did I. I patrolled the trails, marked the signs, and avoided the stone circle. The pit haunted my dreams, its pulse louder each time, a rhythm that matched my own heartbeat. I read the book again, searching for answers, but it was like chasing shadows. The symbols were a language I couldn't speak, the drawings a warning I couldn't heed. I found a passage about keepers, men and women chosen by the hollow, bound to it by blood or choice. Amos had been one, and now I was too. The book didn't say what happened to the others, but I could guess that I started carving symbols into the cabin's walls, copying them from the book, hoping they'd keep the strays at bay. The knife grew warmer each time I used it, its blade catching the light in ways that didn't make sense. The mirror was heavier, too, its surface darker, as if it was drinking the hollow's shadows. I stopped looking into it, but I felt its pull, a whisper at the edge of my mind. The hollow was changing me, or maybe it was showing me what I'd always been. I didn't know anymore. The townsfolk noticed. When I went to Stillwater for supplies, their eyes lingered longer, their voices quieter. Ruth at the general store handed me my coffee without meeting my gaze. "You look tired, Ellis," she said once, her words careful. I didn't answer. How could I explain the weight of the hollow, the way it seeped into my bones? The old man who'd spoken of the keeper was gone, his chair empty, and no one would say where he went. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. I saw the shape again in October, closer this time, standing at the edge of the clearing as the sun set. It was different, its form more solid, its limbs less twisted. It didn't move, just watched, its face a blur of shadow and bone. I raised the mirror, and it vanished, but not before I saw its eyes, 2 points of light, burning like coals. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the porch, the knife in my hand, the book open on my lap, and listened to the hollow breathe. The second hunt winter came early, the air sharp with frost, the trees stripped bare. The hollow was quieter now, but not peaceful. The signs were everywhere, claw marks on the pines, scorched earth near the creek, animal bones scattered like offerings. I knew the stray was close, maybe more than one. The pit was calling them, or they were calling it. I couldn't wait any longer. I had to go back. I set out at dawn, the sky gray and heavy, my breath clouding in the cold. The forest was silent, the trails buried under a thin layer of snow. I carried the rifle, the knife, the mirror, and the book, its weight heavier than it should have been. The stone circle was as I'd left it, the pit darker, its edges sharper, like a wound that wouldn't close. I stood at its edge, the mirror in my hands, and felt the pulse again, stronger now, a rhythm that shook the ground beneath my feet. The stray came without warning. It burst from the trees, its form a blur of bone and shadow, its claws glinting in the pale light. I raised the mirror, and it froze, its reflection fracturing into 1,000 pieces. I drove the knife into its chest, the blade sinking deep, and it screamed, a sound that tore through the air like a storm. The ground shook, the stones trembling, and the pit pulsed faster, its edges glowing faintly. The stray collapsed, its body dissolving into ash, but the pit didn't stop. It was awake, alive, and it was angry. I knelt by the pit, the book open in my hands, and read the symbols aloud, my voice shaking. They weren't words, not exactly, but they felt right, like a key turning in a lock. The pit shuddered, its pulse slowing, and the air grew still. I stood, the mirror heavy in my hands, and saw my reflection, not me, but something else, its eyes burning, its face a void. I dropped the mirror, and it shattered, the pieces scattering across the ground like stars. The final stand, the hollow, didn't let me go. I burned the book that night, its pages curling into ash, but the symbols stayed with me, etched into my mind. The knife was warmer now, its blade glowing faintly, and I kept it close, even when I slept. The pit was quiet, but I knew it wasn't gone. The hollow was too old, too deep, to be silenced by one man. I was its keeper, but I wasn't its master. I saw the stray again in spring, or maybe it was a new one. It stood at the edge of the clearing, its form sharper, its eyes brighter. I didn't raise the mirror, I didn't have it anymore. I held the knife, its blade humming, and walked toward it. The stray didn't move, just watched, its head tilted like it knew me. I stopped a few feet away, my breath steady, and spoke the symbols from the book, the ones I'd burned into my memory. The stray flinched, its form wavering, and then it was gone, its ashes mixing with the wind. That I didn't go back to the pit. I didn't need to. The hollow was part of me now, its pulse my pulse, its shadows my shadows. I walked the trails, checked the fire breaks, wrote reports for the company, but my real work was different. I was the keeper, the one who stood between the hollow and the world. The townsfolk stopped looking at me, their eyes sliding away like I was part of the forest now. Ruth didn't speak when I came to the store, just handed me my coffee and turned away. I didn't mind. I wasn't one of them anymore. The hollow changed, or maybe I did. The trees seemed taller, the air heavier, the light dimmer. I found new signs, claw marks deeper, scorched patches wider, bones arranged in patterns I couldn't read. The pit was waking again, or something deeper, something older. I carried the knife, its blade a constant warmth, and walked the trails, watching, waiting. The hollow was mine, or I was its. I didn't run. I couldn't. Something was coming, and I was the only one left to face it. Years passed, or maybe they didn't. Time felt different in the hollow, like water pooling in a creek. I stopped writing reports, stopped going to Stillwater. The company sent letters, then men, but they didn't stay. The hollow didn't want them. I carved new symbols into the cabin's walls, deeper this time, and the knife sang when I held it. The strays came more often, their forms sharper, their eyes brighter. I fought them, one by one, their ashes scattering across the earth. The pit was always there, its pulse a constant hum, a reminder that the hollow was alive. One night, I saw Amos. Not in a dream, but in the clearing, his coat dusted with snow, his eyes pale and sharp. He didn't speak, just pointed toward the stone circle, then faded into the trees. I followed, the knife in my hand, the air cold against my skin. The pit was different now, its edges glowing, its pulse a roar. I stood at its edge, the symbols burning in my mind, and saw it. A shape rising from the dark, not a stray but something else, something older. Its face was a void, its limbs endless, its eyes a fire that burned through me. That I raised the knife, my voice steady, and spoke the symbols. The shape screamed, the ground shook, and the pit collapsed, its edges folding inward like a wound sealing shut. The air was still, the hollow silent. I stood there, the knife warm in my hand, and felt the weight lift, just for a moment. But I knew it wasn't over. The hollow was too deep, too old, to be silenced forever. That I'm still here. The cabin is my home, the trail's my world. The strays come, and I fight them, their ashes a reminder of what I am. The pit is gone, but the hollow breathes, its pulse my own. I'm the keeper, the one who watches, the one who waits. Something is coming, something older, and I'll be here when it does. The hollow chose me, or I chose it. It doesn't matter anymore. I'm part of it now, and it's part of me.